and don't cry. Your folks might understand you by and by. Just move on up toward your destination, though you may find from time to time complications.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to this version of Rose City Gumbo. I am the host for today. My name is Baruti Latif Arthuri, and I'm a host for this special segment on the Black Writers Update. Rose City Gumbo is produced by Vaughn Bailey, along with the help of a dedicated crew, including Maurice, Daniel, Charles, and Gary, and we really want to thank them and Portland Media for this opportunity. I have hosted two other shows for Black Writers Update, Sister Denorja Price and Sister Dolores Dallas. And in those shows, we had a chance to explore a little bit of each of their background, a little bit about the books that they wrote. And we're going to do the same thing today with my special guest, Mr. Mario Duprice. Mario Duprice has a book that he's written called The Power of a Rose. And you'll see that, and we'll be talking about his book. And we're also going to use this time to get to know a little bit about the man himself. He's multi-talented in addition to being a writer. He's a singer. He's a poet. He has just been involved in entertainment at many, many different levels. But I have one special shout out before we get into the program. And I want to give a shout out to Mother Cunningham from Life Change Church, who just was released from the hospital, had a chance to visit with her today, told her I was going to do this show and she was going to tune in. So Sister Cunningham, God bless you and wishing you a speedy recovery. Yeah. And with that, I want to turn over to my guest, Mr. Mario Duprice. Welcome, brother.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Very glad to have you here. Mm-hmm. And I think I should tell our audience that in the form of full disclosure, I've had the pleasure of knowing Mario now for about 40 years, I think we go back. We actually graduated from Compton High School together. Mario was in the class in 1969. I was in the class in 1970. And I always tell this story here in Oregon. Mario was the student body president at Compton High in '69. And we had almost 3,000 students on campus at that time. So his being student body president was like being the mayor of a small city in Oregon here.
Absolutely.
So with that, Mario, thank you. We're glad to have you here. And before we talk about your book, I'd like to have you just take some time and share with the audience a little bit of your background and what got you to Oregon and what led to your becoming a writer.
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me in. What a pleasure this is, and what an honor just to be interviewed, especially after writing a narrative such as this, and I'll talk more about the book later. My roots, okay, well, born and raised, started out in Los Angeles, California. I was born at Hoover Hospital in LA, way back, way back. We actually go back farther than 40 years, so we don't want to. Well, he already said what year I graduated in, so you can do the math on that. But I was raised up on 111th Street in Los Angeles, across from a big field that would become later the Nickerson Gardens. Nickerson Gardens was like later on, and then I came up there. Moved around Los Angeles for a few years, and used to live on 91st and Broadway at one time, and went to 97th Street School. And then after that, we decided to move to the suburbs. Mm-hmm. The suburbs at that time was a little city called Compton. Now, coming up in the part of Los Angeles where I was, it was what is called acrimonious. In other words, there was really no color distinction. So we had natives, we had Hispanics, of course, a lot of blacks, whites, Asians. So it was a melting pot that I came up in. So as far as the color distinguishing, that didn't happen back then, and we were just friends back then. When we moved to Compton, the same thing applied, because when we first came to Compton, it was back in 1960. it was just the same hodgepodge. It was multicultural. A lot of Hispanics and blacks and whites were there as well. So when we came in, but the interesting thing, and I was mentioning this to you a little bit earlier, and Baruti's family came before my family did, but the Los Angeles Dodgers, the minorities, the blacks, lived in Compton. So what we would do, we, for example, went trick-or-treating when it was Halloween, we used to get signed baseballs, and we'd go over Johnny Roseborough's house, and Tommy Davis would be over. And I don't know, you guys probably don't remember these Dodgers, but back in the day, they were it. And so we would go around and we'd peek through the screen and see them, and we'd get all kinds of goodies and stuff. So we really thought we had really made it, you know, back then. And the neighborhoods, we were extremely close, and Baruti can tell you about that. I mean, there were parts where everybody, you didn't need a community watch. It was like automatic and things like that. And so culturally, very diverse, very competitive though. We had some great ball teams and things like that. And as Baruti and I were talking earlier, we played football on the street, and we had a lot of good competitive games. We had parks where we would go, and Little League and Pop Warner and all those sports were alive and well. So it was a good, wholesome environment. And one little piece of trivia I wanted to throw out, I don't know if you know this or not. There were actually 2 U.S. presidents who lived in Compton. Did you know that?
I know Bush was one.
Yes, that was both of them. So
Oh,
in 1949 and 1950, George H.W. and George W. Bush lived in Compton, California. As a matter of fact, they had a daughter that was born there. Unfortunately, she only lived to be about 4 or 5. But yeah, that was way back. So anyway, growing up in Compton, as Baruti said, scholastically, I tried to get into it. I was on the student advisory boards at the California State Board of Education when I was a teenager, and competed in a bunch of things. I don't want to get so much into that, but I had a good upbringing. Got a scholarship to the University of Notre Dame. And when I went there, my ping pong ball kind of came up, so instead I went into the military. Did my military service in the U.S. Air Force. Went over during the Vietnam War. I went over, actually went to Saigon. From Saigon, I went to Bangkok, Thailand, where I spent most of my time. Thank goodness. I think that's the reason why I came back. Lost a lot of good friends over there, kind of mutual, some of them. Wedlows, and, you know, people like that. And so got through with my military service, came back, and after a little junket, went down to Houston, Texas. I lived there for a little bit, and I was thinking about them during the flood. I worked at this place called Greenway Plaza, and then all of a sudden I was walking down the street one day, and I was looking at the billboards, and something told me to come home. And I got a call from my dad, and he was in Denver, Colorado. He said, "Why don't you come to Denver?" Well, long story short, when I went up to Denver, we went into business and formed a corporation. It was called Rosie Brook Corporation. I was vice president and general manager, and we started out with a DBA that was called the Drummer Supper Club. And I'll talk a little bit more about my dad later. He was a jazz drummer, Akbar the Priest. And so the first club, we had it. It was in Southeast Denver, very affluent neighborhood, and it was very successful, things like that. And then after a while, when we got out of the business, I came to LA. Oh, I got married too while I was there as well. And so he came to Eugene, Oregon. I went back to Los Angeles. So he started the music and businesses up in Eugene and eventually moved to Portland. And one particular day I decided to come up and visit my dad. So I came up and just fell in love with Portland. You know, it was just really nice and nice people, and met a young lady, Edna Mays, who was giving out pamphlets, and she was the first person I met here, and she said, well, she put me on the bus and gave me the grand tour and all this, you know. So I got this great welcoming from her, and, you know, I'm ever thankful for that, and got to meet a lot of families, a lot of friends, and just really, it's kind of stuck on me, you know.
Well,
and,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was
great. And I want to talk more about your experience in Portland. And before we do, I want to go back to the Watts Compton, because nowadays, now that the movie's out, Straight Outta Compton, there's a lot of intrigue about what Compton is like. And there's a lot of people who have a lot of misconceptions about Compton.
Yeah.
And there's a couple things you touched on I want to elaborate on because we've dialogued about this. And number one is my family moved to Compton in 1956.
Right.
And just like Morio's family, my family moved from Watts to Compton. And a lot of the black folks who were living in Watts at that time, they were migrants from the South. Many had served in the military out of the South. They were discharged in California, just like a lot of blacks came to Portland during the war to work in the shipyard. So there was this great migration of black folks coming to California after World War II in the late 40s to early 50s. And a lot of folks in Los Angeles, black folks, settled either on the west side, if you were a professional, the west side of Los Angeles, that's where the teachers were, that's where the preachers were, that was where the people who had a little bit more education. The working class people settled in the city of Watts. It was more blue collar. You know, my father was a roofer, you know, manual labor, so the blue collar folks. And as Morio said, from the fair housing laws were passed in Los Angeles County in 1954. And when that happened in 54, it opened up housing opportunities, and Compton was the suburbs. Compton was moving on up. You know, when you left Watts, you were moving on up. When you got to Compton, to a subdivision home,
That's correct.
you know, we had 3 bedrooms and 1 bath, 5 kids and 2 parents, and we had moved on up. And so a lot of folks followed that same migration pattern. And the other thing that we talked about in Compton was that Compton High School, where Morio and I went, has school colors of blue and white. The number one rival was Centennial High School. Their colors were red and white. And it's very interesting because as Compton started to change from the 50s into the 60s, when the Watts riot happened in 1965, a lot of the diversity of Compton started to move out. As Mario touched on it well, when my family moved to Compton in 1956, it was a mixed community. It was very much a mixed community. After the Watts riot in '65, it started to change. By 1970, Compton had the largest concentration of African Americans on the West Coast, approximately 70%. But at the same time, though, we were very blessed in that we had a principal, Mr. Aaron Wade, who was a black principal who had come to Compton High School after the riots and during the time of the Black Consciousness movement, and he came with an emphasis on quality education. And we were very fortunate in the late 60s, early 70s, that he was the catalyst to get a lot of us to expand and to go outside Compton, to go to school, to go to the military, but to go somewhere. So I just want to add that emphasis to what Mario already added about Compton, because there's a lot of misconceptions and people tend to think it's mostly about gangsters and rappers. But again, you've got 2 people here that grew up in Compton, and there's a bunch of other folks. I just got back from a high school reunion, and it's nice to see folks that are being very much a success. And then, okay, Mario, I just wanted to add that little flavor, but I want to come back to now your Portland experience. And I want to share with the audience how we reconnected after high school. And we reconnected at Maranatha Church one Sunday, and I had come from Compton to Oregon to go to college, got a job, moved around, moved away, came back here in 1989, 90, and sometime thereafter I was sitting in church in Maranatha, and I glanced over to the left, and I saw my former high school classmate, Mario Dupree, sitting there, and we reconnected. And I'm guessing that had to be 20, 30 years ago that we reconnected.
That's a while back. That's 1990, 91, around in there. So that was a ways back. And that's been, what, 27 years?
That's a long time.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, that time just really flew by.
Well, let's talk the audience forward now then. Once you came to Portland, you know, you shared some of your background, you shared a little bit about your family, and definitely talk about your dad, Akbar Dupree. I mean, he was the jazz drummer, you know, who was doing it here in Portland, you know, when I came here too. So I want to hear you talk more about him. So let's talk about your Portland experience now.
Okay, well, coming to Portland in 1990, I originally came up with my aunt. And we came to visit, and while we were here, I mean, we fell in love with it, and this is when I was able to go out and kind of learn a little bit about the city. At the time, I was doing some graphic design down in Los Angeles, and then I saw that the cost of living here back then was a lot less intense. It was more affordable, and the pay was pretty commensurate as far as what I was making in LA compared to what I could make here in Portland. The dollar went a lot further. And the people were nicer. There were no helicopters flying around, shining on you and all this noise and no gunfire and gunshots and da-da-da. So it was kind of like a nice little getaway, a nice little respite. And so I was able to come, and the more friends I met, golly, the better it was. The churches were just lively and very, very close. And so that's always been kind of my comfort zone, is to, go and worship and kind of sit back with the congregations and get to meet folks that way. And so that's what I was able to do. My friend Jeanette Russell took me, and her then husband Benny, they took me to a church called Mount Olivet, which was over on Chautauqua at the time. And I was able to go there, and I just sat in and just really felt comfortable, and I just liked. It's not just that church, though. I mean, I know a lot of the pastors around churches, and I used to, I tell the truth, I shouldn't even say this, but I used to kind of go to certain churches in rotation at first, because I met so many pastors that I liked. I would be at different churches. I'd go over here, and sometimes I would go to Pastor, well, I shouldn't say names, I guess.
No, it's fine. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so at one time I would go like to Pastor Pack's church to hear the music, listen to the choir, then I'd shoot over here at Probasco Church, and shoot to Mount Olivet, hear Pastor Martin, because I was all over Bishop Wells. But so a lot of them, and if I left you out, pastors, I love you all. But I just became just a part of the community, and that's what I really liked about the Portland experience. I got a position doing typographic design with a company, and stayed with them for a while. Then at some point in the early 90s, I got approached to come and audition for a play. And I said, okay, well, what the heck? Well, they were singing in the play. Now, I wasn't a singer. When I first came to Portland, I was not a singer, okay? But I went on and went into the play, talked me into it, and the play was called The Little Shop of Horrors. And it was playing downtown. And so I thought about it. I said, well, do I have to? I found out I was behind the stage with a podium, with a light, and a mic. So nobody saw me. So that was a comfort zone. I said,
And you were singing?
Yeah.
You were singing?
Yeah, feed me.
What year approximately was this?
This is like 91, 92.
Okay.
Margie Boulay was in it with me, and some other actors. Julianne Johnson was in
You're
it.
still fairly new to the area.
Well, yeah, I was fairly new.
Yeah.
But they just welcomed me in the whole bit, and those are all, excellent singers and things like that. And I won't name the whole cast, but we had a blast. We had fun times. We went down, we played at the Brit Festival down in Medford, and we toured around with it a little bit, had a great time. We kept bringing it back and bringing it back and bringing it back. Well, this one particular time I remember, Doris Day's show came in town. And so members of her production came to one of the shows. And so they walked up to me after. They said, would you like to hit the road with Doris Day? And I said, and do what? And do what? Because I couldn't read music. I didn't never consider myself a singer. And so they did, and I kindly kind of turned them down. It kind of hit me. I said, what are they hearing? Because to me, I was just, doing the songs and changing my voice and, having fun with the plant. Yeah. And so after that, I was at a session, and Ron Steen, I don't know, most of you in Portland know Ron Steen. We were at one of his jam sessions.
Ron Steen is a jazz drummer.
Jazz drummer extraordinaire. Yeah. And he's one of the meccas when outside musicians, professional or otherwise, come to Portland. They come through Ron Steen, and we jam, and we have a great time. Anyway, I was just sitting there, and I knew this one song. And so Ron said, why don't you come up there and do the song? So I was all right. So it was like a dare,
Yeah.
So I got up, and I did the song. It's called A Night in Tunisia. So I had
Okay.
fun doing A Night in Tunisia. You know, just
What
had
was the
fun.
venue you were at the time?
It was just Ron's jam session.
Jam session?
His
Okay.
jam session. And so I was nervous. I got up. I got through it, you know. So then a couple weeks later, I came back. I did Night in Tunisia again. Ron said, why don't you go learn some music? Don't do the same song over and over. So I said, oh, man, now what? So I went home. I listened to Johnny Hartman with John Coltrane. I learned a couple more songs, My One and Only Love, things like that. And then I started to, you know, I've had a speaking voice, so I was able to incorporate and elongate the notes of my speaking voice into song.
Yeah, good, great.
And somehow it came out okay, you know.
Great.
And so people seemed to like it. I was at a particular club one night and just a little open mic session, and I went by and the waitress brought me $1. And I said, well, what's this for? She said, well, the couple in the back, they liked your singing. They wanted me to give you this $1. And so I said, well, you take it.
That's your first tip. Your
You know,
first
yeah,
tip. Huh?
Here's your tip. She said, no. That's your $1. And the waitress made me take it. So I said, okay, and I put it down. I put it on my dresser at the house, and my friend Charlene came by, and she saw the $1. She said, what the heck is that? And I said, well, that's, you know, I told her about the circumstance. And so next thing I know, $1 was gone, you know. And I was like, oh, God, if she needed it, all she had to do is ask. Well, she comes back.
I hope she
and
framed it.
She had it framed
Great.
with my name, and the $1 was in it, and the name of the club, and the date, and the whole. And that was my first $1 ever
right.
singing music.
still
and
have
I
it?
cherish. Oh yeah,
You still have it?
I got that, and that's one of my greatest treasures, you know, that I really, really hold on to, because that $1 is worth millions to me.
Yeah.
You know.
And
It's really-
from that launch of your singing career, let's talk a little bit more just your singing career. Where has that taken you? Because I know just recently you were singing the national anthem at the Trailblazer playoff game.
Yeah, just
so
having fun.
Tell us that journey a little bit.
Okay, well, I got to give credit where credit's due. I mean, a lot of my singing professional success I give to the late Janice Groggins. Janice literally just took me under her wing, because the first time I did a thing with Brenda Phillips and I, it was some type of venue, and she said, Mario, why don't you come do a blues with me? And we got up and we did this blues thing. Janice played, and I had this hat on and these dark glasses. That was me disguising myself. Of course, I
want to be
couldn't disguise my
recognized,
voice. Yeah,
just in
right. So that made me a little comfortable. So I got up, and we were, you know, blues. And we were singing this stuff, and Brenda stayed with me. And I kind of got the bug a little bit. I said, this is kind of fun, you know, kind of doing this. And then Janice, who was a genius with the music, and singers around, anybody who ever played with Janice can tell you, she would know every note, every key that you sang every song in that you ever played with her. She had that type of genius. And so, and she knew the tempo, she knew this and that, what changes, what your range was, where you were comfortable, you know, so she would always just play it that way and just really do it. So, man, it was so comfortable. So her, I, Dennis Springer, and a couple of others, we went in and recorded on a compilation album of some of Portland's musicians. We actually, with Janice, I won a couple of Muddy Awards, and things like that. And but of course, because of Janice, I'm just singing in the back, I'm doo-wopping. But just had a great time, the whole bit, and so was able to travel. And so we got to go around Portland. And back then, in Portland, I mean, there were so many different clubs that we could go to. You know, a lot of them are gone now, you know, and but we had about 6, 7, 8 clubs where we just went in rotation. And as long as we went in rotation, we just had a blast. We go around, different musicians, the whole bit, and this is before I even recorded. I was just out having a wonderful time. And then at one point, Janice and I were downtown at the Governor Hotel. And we got approached. You know, I was singing, and this lady, she comes up to me. She says, how would you like to, could you come to our country and sing? I said, yeah, I don't know. I said, well, where are you from? He said, well, we're from Russia, like that. I said, Russia? I said, well, I don't know. I said, Janice, you want to go to Russia? She said, I don't care, let's go. And so I said, well, when would you like us to come? She said, well, can you come Friday? I said, no, because, you know, we're working, we got, you know, a bunch of things. I said, but just say we do come, how long would you like for us to stay? She said, well, can you stay 6 months, 7 months? I said, well, no, because, you know. So we went back and forth like that. So she said, well, my boss is sitting at the table. Could you come speak to my boss? So I went over and I met this lady. She was real gracious. And she said, well, how much do you want to come to our country and sing and perform? And just out the top of my head, I said, well, $2,500 a week each. You know, half the money in our bank accounts plus all expenses. She said, have your attorney here Monday. Like that. And I'm like,
you're like, dang, so much I'm short.
I'm like, what? And so we sat down, and I didn't have an attorney, so I got on the phone. I started calling around, and I found a good friend who just happened to be an entertainment attorney, and who came and met us there and was able to lock in the contract, the whole bit. And we went through, got our passports together, and got all the permission. And so here we go up to Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, Russia, which is in the far east of Russia, where no American jazz had ever been played. We just kind of broke it open. And I mean, it was amazing. When we got there, there were billboards. Now, back in Soviet Russia, there was no advertising on the highways and stuff. Our pictures were there on the thing. And it kind of blew me away, because we got there, we got bodyguards, and we had an interpreter. So.
That is a fabulous story. I mean, that is a fabulous story as we go into our break. That is hilarious how you made that trip to Russia. For those of you in the audience, I want to share with you again, this is Rose City Gumbo, and this is the Black Writers Update. My guest today is Mr. Mario Duprice, who is the author of The Power of a Rose. And we're going to get into talking more about his book. We've taken this time to learn a little bit more about his background. He's multi-talented, in addition to being a writer. As he just shared with us, he's been a singer, or he is a singer. And I also want to have him talk a little bit about his acting career. More than once, I've turned the television on late night and flipped a station, and there's Mario in a movie or something. And so I want to have him talk about his movie career. And once we talk about his movie career, we're going to come back and specifically get into The Power of a Rose, why he wrote the book. And I have to tell you this thing about the book. One thing as we go into the break, it says, The Power of a Rose, man to man, on women, romance, and communication. That is a big bite. My brother Mario, he bit off that. And I always say that a writer should never write about something unless he knows about it. And when Mario talks about his book, he's going to tell us what qualifies him to talk about man to man on women, romance, and communication. We're going to a break.
He put all of his soul into a tenor saxophone. He had a way of talking, was a language all his own. Life story, love and glory. If you listen while he plays it for you now, listen, listen and dig it. Can you dig it? Lester Young is playing what he's feeling, dealing someone may have told you Lester Young, he's out of style. But I'm here to tell you that the press is happening now. Life story, love and glory. If you listen while he plays it for you now, listen, listen and dig it. Can you dig it? Lester Young is playing what he's feeling, dealing and dancing you home. Someone may have told you Lester Young, he's out of style. But I'm here to tell you that the press is happening now. Life story, love and glory. If you listen while he plays it for you now, listen, listen and dig it. Can you dig it? Lester Young is playing what he's feeling.
All right, that was a very nice piece. I thank you for sharing that with us, Mario. And could you tell us a little bit about why that piece was so special to you and who's on that?
Yeah, that's a tune called Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. And that's from my father, Agbardi Priest album, Inclusion. And what a tune that was. That was actually me singing on vocals. My dad also, I talked him in doing a couple of vocals on the album as well. You'll hear my dad singing a little bit. And that was Javon Jackson from Blue Note Records on saxophone, Gordon Lee on piano, Phil Sparks from up in Seattle, who I think is coming here soon or just left. I miss Phil. And then my dad, Agbardi Priest, on percussion, on drums.
Oh, right.
And yeah. Great tune. Great.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And for anyone that may just be joining us, you're looking at Rose City Gumbo, and we're doing a special segment on African American writers. And this is our third segment, and we've talked with a lot of different writers about their projects. And the special guest you're hearing from today is Mr. Mario Dupriest, who happens to be one of my homeboys from Compton, California, but who is multi-talented. He's a Renaissance man. So we've had a little bit of time to talk a little bit about his singing career. We're going to talk about his writing career in just 1 second, but I've asked him to take a few minutes and talk about his acting career. As I mentioned before the break, more than once I've turned the television on late at night, flipping stations. I see Mario. He's been on television shows. He's been in movies. And I think it's important for folks just to get to know you as a person and know who you are. So could you tell us a little bit about your acting career?
Okay, well, well, I've been acting, golly, I thought about it, and I've actually been acting. This year makes, I'm getting old, my 40th year of acting. So, and I'm talking about being, that's the television and all that other kind of stuff. But let me say this, bit parts, okay? No big Denzel parts, no big thing, but it's always so much fun to do them. I started back for NBC. There was a miniseries called Centennial back in '77. And it was a 12-part miniseries, and it was my first speaking part, and God, I had this big fro, huge fro, and and I had a couple of lines, and I was in the scene with Lynn Redgrave and William Atherton, and the miniseries was like a who's who during that period of time. I mean, Perry Mason, Dr. Kildare, and the Fugitive, and about every major star of every show that was going on, even George Clooney, this is one of his first acting parts. George Clooney was in it. Glenn Turman, who would become Aretha Franklin's husband, he was in it as well. I think we held down the fort.
Yes.
He had a few more lines than me, though.
But let me ask you, did you play a cop in that series?
Oh, geez.
Because it seems like,
I'm always
you're always playing a cop. You're the serious guy. You're the straight guy. You come off real strong, a cop guy.
I know. Well, that's one of the parts where I actually didn't do that. I did another couple of things where, man, I've played as a member of law enforcement so many times. I actually did a movie with Madonna, Willem Dafoe, and Archer called Body of Evidence, and I was a forensics investigator in that, and did another one I did a movie called Dr. Giggles. That was a horror movie back in the day, and I just played an orderly in that one and just had a couple of lines in it. And it's so funny, me and my friend Todd Tolses, and I hope Todd is watching, we call each other Salt and Pepper. Anyway, we had a great time on that set, and I wasn't actually cast in that. They actually called me in to read the part of a person who was playing a major role, who was still in Los Angeles, kind of held up. So they needed somebody to read through the script. So I came and read through the script, and the director and producer just really liked it. They said, man, we got a part for you. We're going to put you in a part. So that was just something, and I was standing in, being a stand-in, and they actually gave me lines, and that's how I was able to get that part in that movie as well. So I did some more things. I did one called Payback, with Mary Tyler Moore and Ed Asner. And again, in that one, I played actually an FBI detective. And that, and Mary Tyler Moore's son was accused of murder. And so Mary came to me and wanted my assistance as far as getting him off the hook. And of course, it was a little bit out of my jurisdiction, being Fed and a federal person.
And more recently, you've taken part in some of the mini-series that have come to Portland. They have all these television shows have found Portland all of a sudden, and it seemed like they're doing a lot of mini-series here. And you've done some of those.
I haven't done many of those at all, but I applaud them because they're doing them qualitatively. What happened was back in the day, everybody came here because the production costs were lower, had great scenes. You can drive, and you still can drive 20, 30 miles, and you've got the best scenery, the best, places to shoot, the best neighborhoods, because we have these real wholesome looking neighborhoods, and they're real diverse and things like that. So people came, and some of the best caterers on the planet. So we all ate so good. I mean, one shoot, I think I gained about 10 pounds on it. I was like, oh, I got to get out of here. You're eating prime rib for lunch, and then, the salmon for after lunch, and they got all the ding-dongs and the ho-hos and all this stuff. It was just crazy, but, and you work. I mean, what a lot of folks don't realize about filmmaking, you earn that money. And I remember and I can talk about this because it was so long ago, when I did that Centennial episode, I was on there a full day, and they paid me $600 for that shoot. That was back in 1977. I got residual checks for the next 20 years. My last check was like 85 cents. And I saved. I didn't cash it.
You
but I
that
saved
one
it.
too.
Yeah, that's another one. There you go. So I saved that one as well. But a lot of great memories. I've done some independent films, however. There was one here called Lie Detector. And again, I was head of the FBI bureau for Portland, Don Mansfield. And so we did that one. That one, we had a small theatrical release with that, and they're going to do it again. They want to do a sequel and all these other things. So we'll see. But hurry up.
Oh, that's
you know,
great.
I don't want to hear. You know, I want the hair dye and stuff.
Yeah.
So you know, so I'm just having a blast with the acting here. A lot of opportunity here in Portland as well. Good qualitative talent, great productions, great casting directors who a lot of them I know personally, and I don't knock on the door and try to squeeze parts out of them. I just don't. But you have to really have that availability. For example, for Grimm, you had to have 2 weeks free.
That's the show I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah,
Grimm,
2 weeks free for Grimm. That's why I couldn't do it
That's
Grimm,
a lot of
because
time.
I'm 9 to 5, and so I'd have loved to have maybe been morphed and bumped off in one of the Grimm episodes. But I just didn't have that time to do it. But I saw a lot of my buddies in it, though. So that was good.
Well, thank you for sharing more about your acting career, your acting background, telling us about your singing.
Yeah.
And as we transition into the role you've had as a writer and why you've written and what you've done, there is one quote that comes to mind. It's an African quote, and it says, "Until the lion learns how to write, the hunter will always tell the story." So I applaud you for taking the time to write, to tell our story, because it's more important that we tell our story more and more in different ways.
Right.
And one sister, Denorja, she's a science fiction writer. She's telling the story her way. Another sister's telling her life story. You're talking about interpersonal relationships.
Right.
And I think that's another part of the story. So I want to come back to the question I asked before the break. Now tell us,
what qualifies
you, Mr. Mario DePriest, to write about women, romance, and communication? Tell us that, and then tell us, what did you write?
Well, I've been beat up and beat down. No, I'm just teasing.
That's one way to learn quick.
Well, it all started with an outing, and I was out with a female friend of mine, and we decided to go to a movie, and we went to a movie, and it was a great adventurous movie. So we're sitting there, and we done locked arms, and we in it, and sometimes you get it, and you're throwing punches, and you're ducking, and you're going through all these things. So we're having a blast, had a good time. So then it was time to go. And so I took her back to her place, and and I came in, opened the door and did my gentlemanly stuff, and she came in, and all of a sudden she came out in some night clothes. So I said, "Oh, time for me to go." So she's like, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, obviously, you're ready to go to bed, so I'll see you soon, and because we're friends." She talked about me. I said, "What? Accused me of game playing? What kind of games are you playing about this, and that?" I'm like, "Well," so in other words, I was on one level, she was on another level. There was no right or wrong. There was just a miscommunication. So we actually sat down. We talked about it. We were fine. We chopped it up. But then later that night, I was thinking. I said, I wonder how many people are out there going through similar things where there's a miscommunication or something happens, and maybe some good relationships are ruined, or potential friendships or long-lasting committed relationships are just ruined by misunderstandings. And so I just started to pin down that chapter. I just started writing some narrative about it. And I said, "Ooh, well, while I'm on it, let me start writing about this, and let me start writing about that. So matter of fact, let me just start at the beginning. Let's start talking about first impressions, and how do you do that? How do you come through that?" And so as I started writing the chapters, some of the chapters that came in, blind dates, you know, courtship, being a gentleman. Some of the attributes that all of us have, most of us have inside of us, but sometimes we let it lay dormant for one reason or another, or we don't do them for one reason or another. And I just appreciate what women have done for us through the years, not just the mothering and the nurturing and the other things. You know, they've been at our sides, having our backs, the whole bit. Communication, romance, childbearing, everything. I mean, the essence of our lives, they've been. And so the book is part of just a way for men to actually take this book, read it, and talk. That's the piece with
yes. And I certainly like one description I heard about the book said, this is a book for everyone who has ever been a player, for everyone who think they may want to be a player, and for anybody who think they still are a player. This is a book. And when I had a chance to read the book early on, I had an electronic copy of it, and I read it, and I wrote a comment, and I said it was a very mature take on the issue of communication within relationships. And it was very solid and very sound, and a lot of it, I felt it stemmed around the issue of mutual respect and being open, honest in your communication.
That's it.
That's a fair take?
That's it. Very, very, very fair take. And that's one of the things, like when I talk about the first impressions, that's the main thing. We're men. If we see someone, you know, normally the first attractions are visual. That's just how it is. We haven't met the person yet. And so that first thing we want to do is show ourselves in the best light possible, and we're straightening the tie and we're sitting up straight and we're doing this and trying to catch that look or whatever that is. But what the book talks about is whatever you do, two things: be honest and be yourself, which is an honesty in itself. And so once that happens, you never have to come back and remember what it was that impressed the person in the first place. If you're naturally you, there's no pretense, there's no acting. It's kind of like what you see is what you get. Now, that doesn't have to mean you have to act up or act out, because if you're excited, the excitement's going to come through. That's all right. It's okay about that. Get the phone number. I mean, go through, have the conversation. Do what you're going to do. Create at least a solid foundation for the communication that may or may not go all the way, but at least have a solid foundation. Maybe it's a lifelong friendship. Okay, maybe it's a confidant. Maybe there's so many different things that can happen as you establish communications and relationships with other people. You know?
Well, the relationship, as you described, the misunderstanding you had with this lady, do you find that's a pretty common scenario where one person is at one point in a relationship in terms of what they assume, and another person is at entirely different point? And I also find is that the word friend means different things to different people.
Oh, brother, does it ever? Yeah, it does. And you're hitting it right on point. And what happens, unfortunately, a lot of the times, is that a lot of times us men, we get into the routine. Women they love excitement. They love different things. They love to go out and, you know, they're more demonstrative with their feelings and things like that as well. So as a result, and that's why I mentioned in the book, you got to kind of try to maintain the crush that you had at the outset. Now, that's not a real easy thing to do, but from your heart of hearts, it can be done. How does it done? Variation. You got to mix things up, you know. There's a lot of fun things to do, a lot of things that are free that are fun to do. And once you start treating it as an adventure when you do it, be you traveling, be you at the park or at the beach or whatever you're doing, or at the movie or at the opera or whatever you're doing, it becomes memorable. It's a memorable thing. Yeah, you might grump the first time, you know, okay, come on, I'll take you. But then you go and have a good time. So I said, you know, that really wasn't bad. That kind of was fun. Now you're more susceptible to go and broaden your horizons. Now you can, and if you simply open your mouth and talk and then listen, not try to control the conversation, but let her tell you. She'll tell you everything you need to know.
And then some.
Yeah, your significant other will do that, you know. They will convey to you everything, every key. And the book talks about keys. Some of it is the keys to this and that. I don't want to get all into that, but, you know, that's one of the things. If you listen, a lot of this book is not necessary. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Yes. And certainly, when I read the book, it's a book that men can read to improve themselves, their interpersonal relationships, and how they interact with their significant other, their partner, their spouse. But why should women also read your book?
I had one person approach me, and they were talking about this book, and we were at a sports venue, and she asked me if I would come and sit down. I said, sure, you know, and I won't mention her name, but, you know, she's very, very well known. And she said, I finished your manuscript. This is when it was manuscript form. I said, you finished the whole thing? She said, yeah, I read the whole thing. I said, well, what do you think? She said, let me tell you something. And then she proceeded to tell me all about her marriage. And it was tumultuous. I mean, whoa. And after she got done, she said, that book gave me closure. She said, I'll never forget what he did. But now I can forgive him. Because a lot of the things in here made sense. And she said, what I would like to see is this book put into the school curriculum as mandatory reading for high school males.
My.
Man, what a compliment.
Quite a compliment.
What a compliment.
Quite a compliment.
I was like, whoa. You know, that just blew me away. And I'm like, I hadn't picked the book up again. I'm like, what? Let me read again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I want to have you tell people, how can they get a copy of your book?
Okay. The website's being built as we speak. I actually am doing some book signings. I have one coming up. I know this is going to be repeated. So if I mention a date, it'll probably be in the past here soon. Just kind of keep your eyes and ears open, especially on my Facebook page. You can just look up Mario DePriest, and you know I'm always posting all the events and things there. So you'll know. There's a lot of signings coming up, a lot of readings, things like that. I have another book that'll be out in a few months, things like that. So a lot of things coming up. It's exciting. It's really exciting stuff.
And I would definitely encourage folks to take advantage of the opportunity to pick up Mario's book. Some of the chapters in the book that you'll enjoy reading, as he mentioned earlier, blind dates, courtship, the keys to desire, player no more, dealing with the ego, having patience, loving, pampering, how to create the magic, and enjoying the afterglow. So these are chapters that are very meaty. There's a lot there. There's a lot there, and Mario doesn't pull any punches. And so, and as we start to wrap up here, I know this isn't your last project. You have another project in the works. Could you quickly tell us what your next project is?
Well, I have another book that actually is done. It's going through some edits now, and I actually put it on my Facebook. I'm doing something totally different. I'm having a few of my Facebook friends. I'm giving them a few select chapters to just read through. It's called A Cry from the Darkness, and it's motivational. It's Afrocentric. It's progressive, and it kind of really deals with the African American experience. It gets a little bit more into some of the things, how really powerful we are once we're together. You know what I mean? And that that incorporates outside entities as well. It's not just an exclusive thing. It's really, I don't want to give too much of the book away, but it deals with a lot of things. It talks about education. It talks about the destruction of the family. It talks about some other items that are very challenging in our lifestyles right now, okay? And so it's just a way, it's kind of a call to arms to say, look, before we get too far away, it deals with trust. It deals with a lot of other elements in the community as a whole. And you know, in a future point, I'll get a little bit more in depth about it. I don't want to give too much about it away. Oh, I got a little copy of a little thing of what the cover will look like. This is not a color thing, but this is kind of a little working copy. If you can kind of zoom in on that a little bit, and A Cry from the Darkness, and you know, so it'll be in color when when it comes out.
And you had said you had a poem you were going to share with
Yeah.
us.
Do I have time?
If you have time, let's do it real quick. We've got a couple of minutes, and if you can hit that real quick, then we'll wrap up.
Okay. All right. This is the introduction to it. This is a poem. This is Black Folks Talking. I am your past. I am the torn skin of long removed shackles, the singed flesh, the whip's echoing crackle, the scar-laced back of the defiant. I am the promise broken, the heritage denied, the dream forgotten, the tradition unspoken. I am your conscience. I am the carcasses of endless numbers from unborn infants to undeveloped minds. I need no weapon, for my mere presence reveals the evidence of the crime ongoing. I am your fears. I am the potential disaster, the trigger unpulled, the minefield awaiting, the marriage annulled, the secret passion of your daughter, the obsession of your son, an unwavering, undeterred threat to all you hold so dear and worship in reverberating silence. I am your tears. I am the guilt-ridden memories. I am the words of the song plucked on the unraveling strings of once treasured hopes and dreams deferred. Listen as no one sings. Listen. Listen. I am the salt in the eye's moisture and the earth's fullness. I am your hope. I am the sound of rumbling thunder in the distant cloud that approaches with the promise of a land drenched with Nubian droplets, plenteous and vast, forming a new sea of prosperous tranquility amidst resounding memories of past injustice. I am your future. I am the wrinkled brow of wisdom that knows and understands the ever-thirsting need, the never-ending vision, the essence of the sower seeds that once again will rise and proclaim its true place upon the summit of your fading dreams as the vision unfolds within the conscious, within the tears, within the hope.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Rose City Gumbo, and I am Baruti Latif Arthuri. I've had the pleasure of being your host for this segment of the Black Writers Update. My guest today has been the Renaissance man, my brother, Mr. Mario Duprice, and we appreciate you sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having me.
Background.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
it's been my pleasure.
Thanks so much.
So we want you all to go out to pick up a copy of his book. We want you to support the Black writers out there.
Absolutely.
Because as I said earlier, until the lion learns to write, the hunter's going to tell the story, and we need to tell our story because it's about blacks, for blacks, so we can know black. Amen.